So keeping with Suburban Dad Talk, that has been my idea for the next generation of true crime.
Okay, Suburban Dad Talk.
Suburban Dad
Murder.
True crime.
Oh, Suburban Dad True Crime.
Yeah, no murder.
Okay. What is Suburban Dad? Is this like socks and sandals and
That would probably be the outfit, but I don't know if that would get across.
New Balance.
Audibly. Yeah. Got it. Hey, you we've been discussing lately the power of shoes that make you comfortable. It's something I'm appreciating more and more as I progress. But it would be more of like, a 30-minute, 45-minute discussion of, who left the lights on in the house. who was air conditioning the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Who left that door open?
Who brought the car back and didn't fill it with gas?
Yep.
Or check the air pressure.
Yes.
On the tires. So I could see there's just a whole crabby dad.
Oh, there'd be
audience.
something new every week.
Yeah.
There's a whole legion of dads out there that would tune in.
Right.
As long as it was not too expensive. We kept it free because I don't think dad's going to want to shell out for entertainment like that. It'd have to be free. We'd have no Patreon or anything like that. But
yeah. Well, we've talked about, chewable pills that would probably be targeted towards dads that might even work itself out. The other thought I had was just kind of expand on that. It's actually a mystery that you were not involved with but are aware of. Mm-hmm. You remember the mystery of who broke glass at the pool?
Oh, goodness. Yes. Oh, whoever did that should burn.
But that was, and as far as I know, it remains unsolved.
But
so to catch up our listeners, several years ago at the Suburban pool that Scott and I share.
Yes.
There was very clear. It was pretty much, it's like Fight Club.
It's like the one rule.
There's one rule. Don't bring glass.
Don't bring glass. Do whatever you want, but I mean, it is pretty relaxed.
Yeah, but there's one rule that is supreme above all others.
Why would you bring glass? Okay, so let's get into this talking about, now you've got me going with this dad true crime because I've had this conversation with you. I bring this up to other people sometimes that really don't care.
Well, other people knew about it. So we had someone broke glass at the pool on opening weekend, Memorial Day, a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was shut down, and I heard Monday. I went back to work. And,
and
people who don't go to the pool.
It
got out in the Suburban.
Right. So I just got done listening. I think Steve and I just both listened to Over My Dead Body on Wondery, and so there was the crime there, and they said, "Oh, this is the biggest crime that's happened in Tallahassee ever. It's this mystery." That's how this was. This thing spread like wildfire. So some idiot or
idiots. We're not sure.
Or idiots broke glass at the pool so there was a opening night before Memorial Day weekend when I think that's right, Memorial Day?
Memorial Day is Monday, so it's the Friday that the pool opened.
The Friday that the pool opened, and some idiot or idiots broke glass and they had to shut down the pool for the whole weekend. So you're looking forward to opening weekend. So as Steve's alluding to, like this made the rounds. You go into the office and people are like, "Hey, I heard your pool was closed all weekend," which stinks because it's a really nice pool.
Right.
But I've ranted to people going, "Why would you? Is there anything?" And theories were, I think I tried to come up with these theories of somebody wanted to bring in a bottle of liquor, and because otherwise, if it's beer, you can pretty much get everything in cans.
Logically, you're correct with that. However, craft beer guy. Craft beer guy.
Yeah.
Craft beer guy can't have that in a can. Craft beer guys got to have it in the bottle.
Look at it as a challenge. There are craft beers you can get in cans. So, you don't get to have your normal IPA. You got to get another. You can find them in cans. So anyway, it's horrible.
We could do also is if we suspect craft beer guy as a culprit, we could snag him in with our true crime by having the traditional true crime or podcast beginning of something.
Right.
Where we dedicate our show to a beer. This is Carl. Welcome to Guys Swearing About Things. I'm drinking an IPA, which doesn't matter what it's called because they all taste the same.
How hoppy would you say it is?
It's extremely hoppy to the point of being undrinkable.
Okay, so how many hops would you give it out of 5?
At least 7. Secret fact about IPAs: no one actually likes the way they taste. And then I'd drop a bunch of profanity. But do you got a beer for us? Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. It's an IPA. It's really hoppy and good.
That's right. Hey, listen, man. This. Oh my gosh.
Man, let's drink a beer.
Hold on. I'm down. Okay, so we start dedicating the episode to
the first one would be the mystery of the broken glass.
Yeah.
And we would use it to seduce craft beer guy with the threat. We'll find the hoppiest IPA. We'll find a quadruple IPA.
Yeah. I'm down.
Make sure it's and the taste test would be we'd find the one that you and I couldn't drink, like without spitting out or like instantly being intoxicated after 3 sips, and that would be the one.
Exactly.
The quintuple IPA.
I'll just put Miller Lite into like an IPA looking jug, and so
drop a loaf of bread and a handful of hops in
it. Yeah. So what's the intersection? I'm actually curious about this with the audience here because we've got craft beer guy and we've got like suburban dad.
Dad wants to know.
It's kind of coming together a little bit, but
think about how we felt when our weekend was frustrated because we were looking forward to that pool weekend.
Oh yeah,
and it is leaving the lights on and air conditioning the neighborhood and not changing the oil.
Yeah.
It kind of all is encapsulated in. I spent a lot of money to go to the pool, and some dummy.
And this is
didn't
the one
follow
you
the
look
rules
at.
that again are very. I mean, it is literally bolded in the contract.
Yeah,
it is in bold print. It's almost a joke how much it is called out.
Well, that's why it was so unbelievable, is because it is a parody almost of itself with how many times they say no glass. I think you've got a good idea, and I think most dads, if you were scrolling through podcasts, and there's like over my dead body, and then one of the other choices is like she left the lights on, or like broken glass at the pool, or whatever you want to call it. The case of the missing.
The son you don't like didn't regas the car.
That's right. Yeah.
Dumbass
will never learn.
Didn't change the oil again.
That's right. I would definitely check that out. All right. Well, welcome to Origin of Speakeasies. I am Scott. I'm here along with my friend Steve, and our true crime episode today.
This is our true crime episode.
Oh yeah. We're cracking a couple beers, and Steve's gonna
undrinkable IPA.
That's right.
6 times the hops.
It's disgusting.
It's awful. No one wants to drink it.
No, but we look super cool and our beards look amazing, and we're going to talk about some phrases that may relate to true crime. So Steve, take us away.
So talking about this, looked at a couple idioms that are commonly used and how they tie back, I'd say, to the history of modern true crime, I'd say. So we want to talk a little bit just about the roots of things. And the roots of true crime, like where it comes from, and just talk about where it is the last few years, and I think how we've gotten to this spot. You can go back to pamphlets in the 16th and the 17th century, and we've talked about pamphlets before in terms of Catholics versus Protestants, smack talk, or also breaking away from England and punching King George in the face talk.
Yeah.
So literary crime you'd see on pamphlets. Getting to more modern times, I don't want to say the modern era begins with Lizzie Borden. So the story that everyone seems to kind of know about. So the story of Lizzie Borden, I think, killing her parents with an axe, and gave root to a bad 70s rock group.
So Lizzie Borden was one of the first ones that sort of caught our imagination.
Yeah. And then you had the first like trial of the century. You had the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, which if you get a chance to do some studying, it's impressive. I think Charles Lindbergh, mostly because of some of his anti-Semitism, has gone a little bit under the rug, but just how famous he was and what a influential person he was in the early 20th century, and his child being kidnapped and the subsequent trial and hoopla that went with that. Pretty shocking. And again, it kind of gets that tantalizing, oh, that's awful, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about what's going on with that.
It scares you a little bit. Same reason we watch scary movies, I guess.
Yeah. So, and of course, in recent years, I'd say, you had OJ kind of restarted things again. You had OJ, you had John Bonet, and then from there, the proliferation of cable television and the need to fill space. So you had, I think it's the ID channel is the one that is kind of just baked in with true crime TV shows and things to be scared of.
Right. It's like First 48 and Forensic Files, those types of shows.
All those sorts of things. So, and kind of researching the history of that, for my first idiom to discuss today, in cold blood are also used as, or cold-blooded is another term I've heard that used.
Sure.
Wanted to kind of tie it back to a book that I think is the genesis of our recent kind of true crime fixation that our country seems to have. So the term in cold blood or cold-blooded, is that something that you've heard or used before?
Yeah, cold-blooded for sure. And it's always meant to me like, I've always thought it's synonymous with like you have no heart or, and again, you think about what you learn in school about cold-blooded animals, snakes and lizards and birds and stuff. Yeah. And I do remember as a kid kind of trying to figure out, why is it bad to be cold-blooded? Some animals are cold-blooded, some are not. But then as I got older, it just sort of took on the connotation of sort of you do it without remorse.
Right.
And then In Cold Blood, I think, was a book by Truman Capote, right?
Yeah.
So I've never read the book, but I saw the movie, Capote, and my memory of it, and this is probably what you're going to talk about, which is there was like a murder of a family or something, and then I guess the book must have, and this is probably what you're going to talk about, the book must have been pretty popular and caught our, that fascination. Did he interview the murderer or something? Yeah. So I think I have never put together Cold Blooded and then the book In Cold Blood.
Right.
I don't think about them in the same thought process, but yeah, I'll use Cold Blooded. Or when we were growing up, be like, oh, that's cold. That's cold. So
the jank was cold.
Yeah.
So you hit on both things. So first, the roots of calling something cold-blooded go back years ago, prior 16th century. People used that to talk about when someone did something when they were calm or detached when they did something. There was actually an idea of when early physiologists thought that when that your blood would boil. Like when you get angry, my blood's boiling, like your blood would get hot.
Okay, so we're getting a bonus one here.
Right.
The blood boiling.
Yeah, so kind of like and it makes sense in terms of, a crime of passion. You're hot-blooded doing something. You're doing something under the influence of anger.
Well, something else this just made me think of, which is how, if I'm not mistaken, crime rates go up when it's hot outside. Right? So you can sort of tie that together too and say, if you're cold-blooded, you're committing crimes. Like it takes a lot more determination, or, I could get really mad on a hot day and punch somebody in the face. But if it's cold outside and I go out of my way to go punch somebody in the face, it's a little different. But
I think it gets to that too. So like almost if someone does something, you would give them a little bit more understanding if it's a crime of passion, something that made them angry. But when something's cold-blooded, it's done in more a detached, calculated, unfeeling way.
Right.
And kind of getting back to what we talked about of reptiles being cold-blooded. You think of reptiles as precise. You don't think of many snuggly reptiles that you want to, they're not cuddly animals to have.
That's true.
So, those things combined to make the use of that. Cold-blooded or doing something in cold blood. So doing it without emotion, without passion.
I mean, there's still a little bit of a leap there, but you can see where it comes from.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it is interesting that it became so prevalent. But we've talked before about how sometimes there's just a need for something to try to describe somebody. You're trying to make sense of this, whatever, this person that murdered these people didn't seem to have remorse.
Right.
So it takes a lot longer to say, seemed detached and didn't have a lot of remorse.
Yeah.
He's cold-blooded.
And you know what it means when you hear that, too.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things I think translates well. So did some research on the first use of this, and it goes back to the guy I like to call the Guy Fieri of the 16th century, William Shakespeare.
Oh, nice. Of course it did.
I don't think he was as much into burgers as Guy Fieri was, but
not many people are.
Yeah, but he wrote some things. You might have heard of Shakespeare. So it comes back to his play, The Life and Death of King John. So I thought about reading this to you, trying to do my best Shakespearean accent.
Yeah.
But I'd like to read his quote to you as if I was a Southern waitress.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you were going to say the Swedish chef, but we'll have to circle back to that one day.
Thou cold-blooded slave, hast thou not spoke like thunder on my side, been sworn my soldier, bidding me depend upon thy stars, thy fortune and thy strength, and dost thou now fall over to my fours?
Wow. You missed your calling, man.
I'm a multi-talented person. I mean,
yeah, you are.
And I'm humble. So the first use of it, of cold-blooded or documented use, goes back to Shakespeare. But again, as we talked about it, it's something I think that you kind of hear it, you understand it.
So going back to the Shakespeare, I was so fascinated with your. I was actually kind of like, who's this Southern belle talking to me right now? And I kind of missed some of the. What was the point of? I mean, what was the situation happening there?
Yeah. So the person in that circumstance is being criticized for doing something in a very calculated, detached, unpassionate way.
Gotcha.
Like showing no remorse.
Yeah, everything we just said, basically. So Shakespeare, of course, man, it's amazing how that works. Like he'll just have what you would think of as, I mean, I guess he had no throwaway lines really. You know, he wrote so much, but it was also,
he's Shakespeare.
I mean, he's Shakespeare, I guess, and Shakespeare said it's good enough. So, yeah. Okay, so that's the first kind of popular.
So that's where I think it kind of gets in the lexicon of things.
You can never go wrong with Shakespeare.
Yeah, when in doubt. Yeah. So I like to look back at In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. It's kind of it really fits our modern use of true crime, and it has a lot of things that are interesting about true crime, but also I think kind of the double-edged sword of it. You know, you see sympathy for the killers. You see exploitation of the family that was the victim, but also the killers too were used in that.
Yeah.
And I think you see that just translate a lot to modern things that have really promoted true crime lately. Serial, Making a Murderer, The Staircase, things that I know I've been 2 out of 3 of those I've been invested in. So Truman Capote's In Cold Blood was the first. One of the first kind of new journalism books. He described it as a nonfiction novel. And it's based on research he did about the murder of the Clutter family in Kansas in 1959. A pair of drifters murdered them in cold blood, meaning for no good reason. There was no passion. There was not a marriage breaking up or family things. They basically knew that this family had money and went to rob them.
Right.
And when they arrived and found the money wasn't there, they took the family's lives anyway.
Yeah. So I think a couple of thoughts here, just on, since we're talking about just true crime in general. I think one of the reasons it's so popular, because I have given this some thought, partially because we have a podcast that's not true crime, and we know a lot of people that do true crime podcasts, and I do enjoy some of them.
And we listen to it with all due hypocrisy.
Yeah, so this is not like I'm in no way. Well, here we'll slander a little bit. But it's not. Listen, there are a bunch of McDonald's because we like to eat Big Macs. You know, if we all didn't eat them and didn't like them, they would go out of business. Just like true crime is booming because we like to hear it. But I think part of the reason is we want to make sense of these things. So what you just said is, okay, these drifters killed these people. They didn't get robbed. They just killed them. And you kind of want to go, whoa, that's why? Because it's hard to think somebody could come in. If you can I think one of the reasons sometimes the trap that we can fall into, they were talking about this case recently. I was listening to the My Worst Date podcast, which is one of the ones I like. And it's not a true crime podcast at all. It's about dating. But then they have a segment where somebody, of course, talks about recent crime, recent stuff in the news. The girl was kidnapped at the bus stop, and I don't remember her name, but I don't remember from where.
Right.
And they found her after like 3 months or something. Some kid had just kidnapped her. And the reason it catches everyone's attention is because you want to figure out, was the girl doing something? Was she like, did she meet some guy online? Because if you can figure out what they did to, not that they caused it to happen to themselves, so that's where you get in trouble a little bit, you can prevent it from happening to you.
Right. So,
but the idea of like drifters just coming in and murdering you, I mean, we need to know why they did it so that we can avoid that. But if you can't, it's just kind of, it's a catch-22.
So I think it hits on a couple things. And the first one that you're talking about there, I think it gets kind of just to a base fear that we have of some primal thing of when something happens that for no reason.
Sometimes it's just random. The guy said he saw the girl and just wanted to kidnap her.
So it gets to that. And I think it also too gets to, I'd say almost that's a positive thing. It gets to our base instincts to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
On the other side of stuff, I'd say these things also really appeal to us in a pornographic way. If you think of what a lot of true crime stuff is, it's seeing things that you're not supposed to see or hearing things you're not supposed to. Or like
voyeurism in a way. We talked about that with Peeping Tom.
Yeah. So,
hearing 911 calls.
You're hearing the details of things. You're getting, behind the curtain information. You're hearing the 911 calls. And I think that's what sometimes it kind of gets with me. I feel a little bit, naughty of like, do I really need to hear the panicked person calling on 911 in the worst moment of their lives? Yeah,
I would agree. Those are like, I don't feel like I do like listening to the interrogations happening and all those things, because usually it's like the bad guys are squirming. But when you hear the 911 calls and like these horrible people, these people going through these horrible things, it feels bad. And now I saw a meme which said something like, imagine being brutally murdered and then having the host of a true crime podcast go, we got a great show for you this week to describe it, which is very fair. I mean, it's people do, let's just be real, people do profit off of these tragedies. Now they will justify it and we listen to it. And again, I'm not trying to cast stones at all, but it's a tricky proposition. And to your point, like there have been so many shows. You were talking before about the ID channel, but I mean, I remember before that, just watching like a 48 Hours Mysteries or like even before that, Unsolved Mysteries, those types of shows a lot of times dealt with murders, and those were really, I loved those. So we have that thing. So it's not True Crime Podcast's fault that we love this stuff.
Yeah, and it's us. I mean, like, as you mentioned too, there's a reason why this stuff is served up, because people want it, ourselves included.
Sure.
So getting back to In Cold Blood. So one of the things that made this book famous or infamous was the way that Truman Capote interacted with the two killers, and spent a lot of time getting to know them, and in his work, really taking their side of things. There was a lot of I've read the book before. It's been a while, and I kind of hit some high levels going back through it. So there's detail on what happened to the victims. The victims aren't left in this, but at the same time, there seems to be almost a little bit too much emphasis on the killers themselves, and it's been speculated that Capote would almost probably admit he got too close to him as part of this. But in the same way that the family whose deaths were exploited, these guys were exploited also too.
Interesting. And what's interesting too about this, as opposed to, did you watch Mindhunter on Netflix?
I did for a while, and then it got to be too much.
Okay. Well, I very much enjoyed that show, and I think the difference here is those guys, and I don't remember the name of the actual FBI guy that the main character is portraying. He got really close to the killers too, but it was ultimately to prevent this type and understand them more. I don't know, you tell me, but with In Cold Blood, it doesn't sound like there was like some sort of greater good he was going for, but he was just being a journalist and trying to get into the mind of them, not in order to learn so that we can in the future prevent, or it was just
right.
He was maybe being a little too empathetic.
Well,
to
it
them.
came to the point also that I'm not sure if this is attributed to him or someone else had pointed out that basically his book couldn't end until the two guys were put to death.
That's right.
You can't leave that open. So again, I think it points back to kind of our modern, maybe getting a little bit more information than we need, but also I think having sympathy for the accused as opposed to the victims. And I think that's one of my knocks against a lot of modern true crime. You look back at Making a Murderer, and
sure.
I'll go out there, and I've watched that hook, line, and sinker and enjoyed it and absorbed it. And then 50 minutes when I was done, I Googled Making a Murderer, what was left out.
Yeah.
And I think that is my knock against this too, is the amount of things.
The staircase.
The amount
of
things that are biased in the point of the accused point of view. Now, if someone's been unjustly, tried for things and convicted, I support that information coming out. But at the same time, we're kind of exploiting people who have lost their lives, but in a way that, really, Making a Murderer, if you find what was left out of that, it's
really? So I watched most of it, and he certainly looks like he didn't do it based on the way they portrayed him.
Key facts that don't fit the narrative that they were trying to push, and I'm not going to list that here. I'd say
I'll check it out.
Spend some time doing that.
I'll bring up a couple other ones real quick, and one of them is one of the first documentaries I ever saw was the Paradise Lost one, and I don't, again, there have been a lot of things that have come up recently where people have said that the way that was edited there were a lot of problems with it, problematic. But moving on from that, last night HBO just premiered the new Adnan, whatever his last name is, thing,
the serial guy,
and I listened to that serial riveted as it came out. I was like one of the people that was hanging on to every week, and you listen to it, and it does sound like the host of the show, it feels like she's pretty empathetic to Adnan. That's just my opinion.
But she at least admitted it. There was points that she discussed how she's conflicted and not really sure what the truth is in it, which I think is a lot better than some of these.
Yeah. Well, I'll be interested to see what the show is like, the HBO show is like as well. But anyway, your point is well taken, and it's something that we all have to remember is if you really want to know more, there is more information out there on most of these cases that you can get, because there's always multiple sides to these things, and a lot of times there's a narrative for a reason.
So since we've talked about murder and cold blood, let's lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah, this is our most serious podcast.
Yeah, this is. So let's have some fun. Let's talk about the Beatles.
Oh, okay.
And let's talk about Helter Skelter.
Helter Skelter.
So the term Helter Skelter, you've heard that before? Have you used that before?
I am excited because when you said we were going to do this one, this is a term that I've always wondered, number one, what it meant. I know it has something to do with the Manson family murders, and like somehow it was called Helter Skelter, and then I know there's the Beatles song. And the whole reason we have this podcast is because sometimes I go, what does that mean? And I wanted to Google it and find it out. This is one I've never taken the time to Google to really understand what it means. So that's my long-winded way of saying I don't know what the term means.
Yeah. So before we get to the happy discussion of how it's been used in modern times, let's talk about its roots.
Please.
So Helter Skelter is a term that means kind of things are chaotic and disorderly. Also means pell-mell, which is a term I've read, but I don't think I describe anything as pell-mell.
I did not know that. Yeah. I knew Helter Skelter kind of meant unruly, out of control. Pell-mell. I've heard it. Makes me think of Pall Mall cigarettes.
It could be. And maybe that is. Maybe that's how that got started with that.
Who knows?
So it's a British term, common use in England for about 400 years.
Oh, wow.
Shows up in the USA in the 1820s. And an early use I found of it was actually from Thomas Nash, and used it in his Four Letters Confuted from 1592. Mm-hmm. Helter Skelter, fear no colors, course him, trounce him. Now the context of this.
I think we need to hear that in the Southern Waitress voice.
She's gone.
She left?
She had a big table, and she's taking a smoke break
All right.
out back now, so she can't come up there. But to say something's helter skelter is to say something's in disarray, and I think I've seen it. I think written more than used.
Yeah, I feel like everything was helter skelter. I feel like I've heard it.
Yeah, it sounds like the opposite of hunky dory.
Yeah, oh man, that would have been a good episode. Hunky dory and helter skelter. Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah,
there's no like helter on its own. I don't know of that being a word. Skelter, it kind of sounds like shelter a little bit, but
you say it together, it kind of.
Oh no, it definitely works.
Yeah, it's got that.
It's oh man, there's a word somebody emailed me. It's like canoris.
Did someone call you a canoris?
No. So Sandy, my dad's wife. So she, I think her sister had emailed and said Scott and Steve should would probably like this word since they do this podcast. I think it's canoris, which means like audibly pleasing to the ear.
Okay.
So helter skelter, audibly pleasing to the ear, like a lot of the ones that we talk about here.
Yeah, which is why I think they exist. So getting to more modern times, Helter Skelter was a song by the Beatles on the White Album.
That's right.
Which that album I think is a
Disc 2, I believe, or side 4 or whatever it was in that vinyl.
I like now that we've gotten to the point that we sound like old men because we're discussing what compact disc it was on, let alone what side of the vinyl album that it showed up on. Yeah. So Beatles song on the White Album, a little bit, this is in times before heavy metal music, and I wouldn't call it heavy metal, but it's a little bit louder, a little bit more dissonant than a lot of Beatles songs, and has a kind of, it comes up every now and then. I have on like some running playlists that I listen to of just it's kind of a song to get you pumped up and get going. So unfortunately, it also got someone else pumped up by the name of Charles Manson.
So the song came first then.
Yeah, the song came first. So Charles Manson's one of those guys too that I think when we with In Cold Blood, that's almost like the higher end, I think, of true crime stuff.
Sure,
there's some things, and I think that also relates back to Serial and Making a Murderer. They're not as lifetimey movie, sort of salacious.
There's actual journalistic ethic going on there.
And I think on more of the kind of base side of things is anything to do with Manson. It gets to your primal fears, but it's just such an unnecessary and over the top, and coming at the time it did in the late 60s where people are just the wheels feel like they're coming off.
Right.
Just exploits people's fears and that. So I'm not going to give too many details. It's been beat to death anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
And also, no one, I hope he's, wherever he is, he's very uncomfortable.
But you're already, very hot where he is right now.
Yeah.
But you already sort of answered my main question that I never knew, which was, I didn't know if and this is once again my lack of having a good history timeline, which came first, whether the song was referencing Manson or whether Manson listened to the song and liked the canorousness of it or whatever and used it, or got him pumped up.
Yeah. So Manson, and we'll get back more. I don't like him necessarily promoted as some sort of like super powered crazy person. He was just evil. Yeah. So he was just a very bad person. Right. So many Beatles lyrics supposedly were speaking to him. And Helter Skelter was one of them. And he was hearing things and interpreting it. And he used the term Helter Skelter to discuss what would happen when basically an apocalyptic race-based war would start.
Right.
That he was looking at as the way that his reign or whatever would begin with Helter Skelter. So that was the term that he used of everything slipping out of control, and this would be the race war that would take over America.
And he'd have his opportunity in the chaos.
To do whatever he was going to do.
Yeah.
So this also was used as the title of a book about Manson and his crimes and his trial, Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi. Mm-hmm. Vincent Bugliosi. Gosh.
Vincent Belloni.
Close to that.
It reminds me of Billy Baloney from Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Billy Baloney.
Billy Baloney is one of our favorites.
I can say Billy Baloney.
It's so fun to say. But anyway, I don't mean any disrespect to the author of Helter Skelter.
Yeah, thank you.
Anytime I can work Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah. So he was also, in addition to having a name that I can't pronounce, he was the prosecutor of Charles Manson and wrote the book on that.
Can I say something?
Please.
I'm not a big fan. I mean, I haven't thought this through, which is like most things I say, but I don't like when people profit off of like legal cases they were involved in.
Yeah.
Dude, just do your job, and you should not be allowed to. Anyway, sorry to
go
off on that little side tangent, but anyway, so.
No, I definitely think there's some truth to that. And one of the things I actually like about Vincent is he went out of his way to not have Manson elevated as some sort of folk hero.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just immoral. I mean, he
made it clear that this wasn't a magical person. There's a good quote from him. He said, I strongly suspect his magical powers were nothing more or less than the ability to utter basic truisms to the right person at the right time. So, I'll give him, granted, he did profit off this awful crime, but at the same time, anyone that keeps Manson from being a folk hero, which is one of those things I think the older we get to, you don't, the novelty of, we were of an age when natural born killers came out. And just, catching that now as an adult is just, it's just repulsive.
I agree. I agree. Speaking of movies, I'm always excited about a new Quentin Tarantino movie. And he's doing one called, I think it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's set during the time of, I guess, the Manson stuff is going on. There's not a lot of detail about what's going to be, how big of a part that'll play, but that'll be interesting.
It will be, because I've been waiting for him to get into kids' movies, and it sounds like this is going to be his transition into,
I'm sure
into children's film.
Yeah, and I don't know why I sit here and say, well, Natural Born Killers kind of felt like a precursor to some of the glorification of like the torture porn stuff, but even though it's not torture porn.
I think that was more, as much as I just totally turned into my own father, and I'm fine with that during that, it was also, I think, done to be a little bit over the top, that it wasn't as, it was to kind of bait people like me to be
I guess,
annoyed by
I guess it was. It seemed, but then I turn around and love Quentin Tarantino, but I can't put my finger right now on what the difference is, that one of them makes me feel gross and one of them, like, I feel like is worthwhile art, or, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that has to do with the age when you see it at what the larger point I was trying to get is, I think as younger people, you have a little bit more tolerance for extreme things like this, and can see the entertainment value in some awful, horrible thing. But the older you get, the more you realize that there's people that suffer and die, and it's
Well, there's that's right, and there's like something. You're going through a rebellious phase, and again, to sound like an older guy, but I mean, everyone kind of goes through that thing, and there's something where you're like identifying in a weird way with whatever the folk hero might be, and you can look past the crimes. It's like people wearing like a Che Guevara shirt, like we talked about that. It's like these folk heroes, okay, but we don't really want to get into. We're just going to brush past any of the really awful stuff that they've done, or believed in. Definitely.
We've had a chance here to talk about true crime. We've talked about In Cold Blood and Helter Skelter, and the uses of that, of idioms, and also how it relates to true crime. Trying to think of how this relates to our mystery, which still hasn't been solved, of who broke the glass at the pool. So,
who broke glass?
Do you have a speculative theory that you'd like to share on who broke the glass and why?
So I've given this a lot of thought, and I'm going to say that it was a guest that someone brought who didn't get all the emails, and whoever brought them should be basically tried and prosecuted as if they were the guest. But I think it was a guest who brought in some like hard lemonade or something like that. I don't think it was the IPA guy or the liquor guy. I think ultimately what it comes down to is some dude was like bringing in a date or something for, hey, let me show you the pool. And the date brought in some hard lemonade.
I think you bring up a crucial fact of, we need to know what type of bottle it was, because if it's craft beer guy, that's one thing, because he would be probably proud of the craft beer that he brought in and have to tell somebody, or his dad instincts would kick in. But if somebody actually did a Mike's Hard Lemonade, there's the added thing of not only am I going to be shamed for closing the pool down, it was because I was, trying to take a freshman girl.
That's right. I almost said Zima, and then I realized, like, are those even around anymore?
Well, there's UVA people that listen to this podcast, so we don't want to make them feel uncomfortable.
Right. That's right. And so I think that we should just assume, like, whoever you are out there, somebody out there knows something. That's all I'm going to say.
And if you take anything away from this podcast, don't bring glass to the pool.
Don't bring glass to the pool. I haven't thought this through, which is like most things I say.